Well, Dave, we're on the mighty River Wye today. I'm going to say your home venue, your home river. You're having a brilliant day, catching on the bolognese, lots of chub. But you have been involved in a little bit of controversy lately, to be honest. With regard to, I'm going to say pollution incidents and basically standing up to a few people you believe are telling some half-truths from what I've seen.
Calling them out, Tom. Calling them out. That's what I've been doing. So,
what's it all about, mate?
Okay, so basically, there's been a campaign on this river for some time now about pollution caused supposedly by chicken farms. Now, back in the, just before COVID 2020, we had record droughts and the river looked a bit of a state, and then we had a record flood and that wiped all the ranunculus weed out, and it coincided with this rhetoric that started coming out that basically the chicken farms, all their manure has been spread onto the fields and had raised the phosphate level of the river and had killed everything. Well, at the time there wasn't much weed about, and it did make you think, oh right, okay, maybe that is. But I've always followed the weed because I salmon fish, during the close season, the coarse close season, and sometimes the weed would fill up salmon holes and it was annoying, it would stop you fishing. So I'd always known that we had some years we didn't have much weed, but and if it was a particularly wet spring, weed growth in the summer wouldn't be great. So I sort of follow weed, but anyway, it's sort of tied in, and we were thinking, oh god, this chicken muck is a big thing, and we were led to believe that everything was dead, which it clearly isn't. Anyway, so all these different groups started cropping up. Shall we say not-for-profit organisations, Tom, which,
NPOs.
Yes, charity would be stretching the truth, I think, but all these non-for-profit organisations, they have CEOs and a lot of well-paid staff, and they were all jumping on this thing, and then suddenly you start seeing things on the, like the Daily Telegraph and things like articles about the River Wye, how these chickens killed the River Wye. And then as an angler who fishes, someone who lives on the river and sits and just marvels in the beauty of everything we see, to hear someone saying that they killed the river was outrageous. I couldn't, and it took me a while because these groups sort of, gained popularity, and it was all very sort of the big thing to be a Wye campaigner. But I sort of started to speak out a little bit and say, look, I think you're over-exaggerating it. I don't think this is the case. And I got absolutely, caned for it, I suppose is the word. People were like saying...
When you say people, who are these people?
So these people who've set up these groups, these like Save the Wye and Friends of the Wye and all this. And these are people, really, who don't spend any time on the river. And they're telling me, these are people who are hardly set foot on the river, and they're telling me that the river's dead. And we're catching record numbers of fish. We've got a chub explosion on the river at the moment. We sit fishing every day. What have we seen today? We've seen kingfisher, we've seen a pair of kingfishers and a single kingfisher. All these gulls, we've got diving birds.
I've seen an otter and a mink up to now, and I've also seen a cormorant, a goosander. Yeah. Now,
I'm always careful, Tom, to just not to sort of dwell on this part, because we know Belmont's a bit of a freak. We know this winter fishing is just something else, but it's always been good here in the winter. There's always been a migration here in the winter. It's just at the moment we're very much at the peak of a wave. So I'm careful not to sort of document this too much, because I don't believe this tells
it's not
that
typical
the river. I'm not saying this is for this the river must be absolutely healthy. But what I look at is the things that I see in the summer. And you've been with me on the river in the summer when we're wading out in the river and we look down and you see the abundance of minnows and fry, and the kingfishers are flying around, and we're catching chub and barbel everywhere you sit on this river. It's all very well catching these fish in Hereford town centre now, but if you go in June and fish out of town, you can't put a maggot on because there's too many small fish, and you can't put a piece of meat on because you catch a chub if you're trying to catch barbel. So it just all doesn't tie up. And anyway, so I've basically started calling them out. But I've taken a lot of stick because people say, oh well, you're an angling guide, you're going to say it's healthy, you're going to think, but how can you attract people to a river on the that they're going to have this wonderful day, and then they come and the river's polluted and
No, you
dead.
wouldn't want to go and fish in a chicken shit soup,
No,
would you?
and if I did that, I don't think my business would last very long.
No.
So it's ludicrous to suggest that. So anyway, been getting a bit of stick, but what I saw, and this was the most worrying thing I've seen so far, was 2 weeks ago, just after Christmas, we had a major pollution incident on the river. And what I've been saying all along is, look, we need to protect this river. It's not dead, it's healthy. There's a lot going on here. We need to protect this river, but we need to look in the right direction. Stop this obsession with poultry farms. And we had a pollution incident where oil was let out of a land drain or a culvert, and it covered the whole river. It's the most shocking scenes I've seen on this
I think
river.
hopefully you're going to send me some footage and I'll be able to just overlay them over the top of this.
Yeah, it was shocking. It was the most shocking thing. Now, luckily, it was oil. It seems to have floated. Yeah, don't get me wrong, it ends up somewhere, but it didn't have we weren't seeing dead fish or anything like that, but it was literally the most shocking thing I've ever seen. Far more shocking than anything that they're suggesting is going on with chicken farms. And I was waiting for the response. So we've got like a new Green MP in the city here, who's very vocal about the river, and they said nothing. And all these different groups who've been campaigning, they said nothing about this pollution incident. And that's when it really twigged to me that what there's a campaign to make sure that everybody thinks that the river has died because of agricultural pollution, because there's a big lawsuit going on that a firm called Lee Day, who I have to say I've got links to. They're very much in partnership with River Action, who are a group who do good work for rivers, but they refuse to accept that they say this river has been destroyed. That's their word, destroyed this river has been. There are also links to the Angling Trust as well, but this Lee Day are basically bringing a lawsuit, and what they're looking at is they think they stand to win compensation of 150 to 200 million pounds, of which they would take 30%. So that, I think, tells you why there's such a concerted effort to make it sound like this river is dead. And for them to not say something about that pollution incident, when there's oil bank to bank flowing down the river, flowing for miles down the river, and for them to not even mention it, I think it tells you where we're at. They are absolutely hell-bent on making sure that covering that up and making sure that the only pollution they talk about is agricultural pollution. And of course, the other side to it, Tom, is because I started to speak out, I started speaking to a few people, and a few people contacted me, and some clever people, actually, some scientific people, and someone came to me and said, you realise this idea about phosphate levels rising is a misnomer. It's not the case at all. And what this guy had done, had been and got all the historic data about phosphate, all the phosphate readings going back to the 70s, and it showed that the graph declines. Phosphate levels in this river are a fifth of what they were in 1972. But we've all been led to believe, or the world's been led to believe, that literally all this chicken manure was seeping into the river and the phosphate level has gone up, but it's actually gone down. So there's no science to back up what they're saying either. Apart from the physical evidence that we're seeing now, there's no science either. So I've sort of started calling them out, Tom, and it's not going to make me any friends, but I do feel what I'm finding now is there's a lot of people on this river, farmers, perhaps kayak companies, who are too scared to speak out against this. And because I've spoken out, suddenly people are coming forward and saying, you're right, and they're almost like I've sort of become a mouthpiece for some other people, I suppose. But I'm going to go with it, Tom, because I just feel like what I'm worried about is that we're going to end up with a lot of people who don't know the first thing about this river becoming the authority on this river, and I think that's dangerous. If people are prepared to look in the opposite direction when you've got oil flowing down the river, I think we're in a very dangerous state of affairs.
Couldn't agree more. And as you say, there's not much wrong with the fishing, is there?
There's
not much wrong with the wildlife, is there?
And I say I'm always careful not to just, because this is the other thing. When we say to these groups, look, we're catching record numbers of fish, they say, well, that's because there's not enough natural food. They've got to come to the angler's bait because there's not enough natural food. Well, how long does that last for? Because so far it's been lasting about 14 years.
Doesn't work like that, does it? You and I both know that doesn't work.
But they always have to find a reason, Tom, and it's clear now. And my aim now is just to document it, to show them that they can't ignore the health of this river. And I really hope that this whole lawsuit thing against, and this obsession with corporate American poultry money is put to bed, because I think it's actually, considering that they're supposedly campaigning against the greed of the American companies, the root of what they're doing is money. So, it's, is the saying, the money root to all evil is money, is it? Or something
Maybe.
like that?
Yeah, something like that.
So,
is there anything anyone can do to help? Anything you can...
I think all I ask people to do is to look at the evidence and question it. When someone tells you, and I have it loads of time when I go around the country fishing matches and people say, oh, the River Wye's in a state, isn't it? I'll say, well, look at the evidence, have a look at the catches, have a look at and ask question, because ask them for the science, because there just isn't any. All they've got is a probability. They suppose they've got this probability. It was to do with a case in America where they proved that this company had poisoned a river, and it basically worked on the fact they got the judgment on a probability. And what they're saying now about the Wye is that 70% of pollution in the Wye is agricultural, and these chicken companies represent 80% of Wye agriculture. So the probability is they killed the Wye, but the problem is they didn't kill the Wye, Tom.
No. The Wye's still very much alive.
Yeah, but they want the world to believe it's dead, and I think that's a very dangerous place to be. And
well, they say there's no such thing as a victimless crime, and there's no such thing as a crime without a victim, is there?
No.
Let's be honest. If there's no victim, if the Wye's not dead, then there's no crime.
No, and like I say, I'm not, I'm not saying that. I just say we've got to protect the river, but protect it with the truth, not with this lie that's basically based around. And the other thing that I didn't mention as well is, there's a lot of. It's not just the money side of it, it's also anti-meat. Obviously there's a lot of organisations out there who don't like meat production, so they'd love to see a sort of a poultry company get taken to making it difficult to produce poultry is what I'm saying. So there's an anti sort of meat eating campaign there as well, part of it as well. So it's like a pile-on for the Wye Valley, and unfortunately it seems like the truth is getting lost in it all, Tom.
Yeah, well, that's been really interesting. Thank you for bringing me up to speed on it, mate. As you say, very worrying, but hopefully people will see through and the truth will prevail.
Hopefully.